All right. Hey, good morning. Hope you had a great Fourth. Man, now it's next holiday is Labor Day, right? So we've got kind of a break. Hope you had a good one. Tammy and I, ended up going a little north east, looking at the piece of property. Man, it's gorgeous. Not sure what we're gonna do with it. Not sure we're gonna buy it, but it had some flooding issues in certain areas, and so we're just gonna pray through it. But since the top was down on the car and we were already up there, we kind of did a little southeastern tour of the city, just back roads all the way down to south of Birmingham, and then up in back home, stopping in a few spots, a little lake that I used to visit when I was a kid, like Purdy. Stopped in there, stopped at a little salvage place that we like to look at. And so it was a good day for us. We just enjoyed being by ourselves and just kind of sifting through the day. Did a little studying in between, and got some ice cream because you have to on the 4th after our barbecue. So it was a great day, and hope yours was good as well. And so, hey, let's jump into some truth today. We are in Luke chapter 2, and winding up that section, which will then lead into the public ministry of Jesus. But we're still establishing really Jesus' childhood. So we've looked at, and I think if we can break the summary of this down, it is that Luke was determined that you and I would have a good, accurate account of eyewitness accounts of Jesus being born. And so we saw that. We saw that he had given to us several witnesses, right? There was Zechariah and Elizabeth, righteous people who said, hey, this happened. Mary and Joseph, again, righteous people who say this happened. The shepherds, who were the common folk that the angel came and spoke to, and they went and they saw and they told it happened. So it was to those who were related to Jesus by virtue of being either, aunt, uncle, cousin, whatever that was, mom and dad. Simeon, an old prophet, confirmed it. Anna, a worker in the temple, servant, aged disciple, she saw it and spoke about it. And all of them, almost to a person, gave a proclamation of truth. Whether we would call that poetry or prophecy or whatever you would, but they all had something that they said and declared by the Holy Spirit about this child. And so we have no doubt about any of that. Now, what Luke doesn't tell us, because he jumps from that so Jesus was born, 8 days he was circumcised, 40 days from his birth he was presented in the temple. That was a time of purification for Mary. Anytime there's an issue of blood, there's a purification process. So if it's a menstrual cycle or whatever, and this the birth of a baby. So Jesus is 40 days old, and then Luke, when Simeon and Anna saw him, and then Luke says in verse 39, and when his parents had completed everything in accordance with the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own city of Nazareth. Now, there's a little break in there that Matthew records that Luke doesn't, and for whatever reason why Luke didn't, maybe because he said, hey, Matthew went into great detail about that. I've got a different kind of mission of what I'm trying to do, and so I'm going to leave that to him, right? Could have been. Not really, yeah. Could have been that. So let's go to Matthew chapter 2, and I just want to kind of wander through that because this is where it fits in. It would have been after this purification and before they go back to Nazareth. And the reason why that we would suggest that is because, do you remember when they came, they gave the turtle doves? Well, something happened between them being a modest family to when the wise men came and gave them some significant wealth that we assume that potentially they would have given a lamb as opposed to the dove. So this must have happened after this purification of these 40 days. But it's up for debate. We're just surmising here, and I'm just trying to kind of fit it in a timeline that makes sense. But let's just read it together. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, the Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who was born King of the Jews? I know in your nativity scene you have the three wise men. They're right there at the nativity scene. That's not where they were. This happened a period afterwards. He's already been born. They know that. That's why they're saying, hey, where is he? We have traveled from the east. So if you kind of determine how long that could have been, it could have been anywhere from the 30 to 90-day kind of a cycle. But here's where we are. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And gathering together all the chief priests, the scribes, the people, he inquired of them when the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, In Bethlehem in Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, and by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for from you will come a ruler. He will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly called for the Magi to the, hey, bring these guys to me. Determined from them the exact time the star appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me, so that I may too come and worship him. Now, Herod cared nothing about worshiping Jesus. He cared about killing Jesus because it was a threat to his kingdom. So it says, verse 9, After hearing the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star which had been in the east went on ahead of them until it came to a stop over the place where the child was to be found. Not where the child was born, where the child was to be found. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And after they came into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And after being warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. They were like, hey, just stay away from Herod. Now, what happened in the meantime? Now, when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Now, they're gone for a period of a couple of years, and so this is kind of what's taking place. So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, while it was still night, and left for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod. This happened so that what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. So there's this diversion, a holy diversion, into Egypt to hide out from Herod, who was at this point going to kill all the children 2 years old and younger. So that's the time frame in which this thing happened, within a 2-year window. And so they fled to Egypt. Verse 16. Then, when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became enraged and sent men and killed all the boys who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, who were 2 years old or under, according to the time which he had determined from the Magi. So Jesus could have been at least 2 years old by the time that the Magi get there. So we're saying there's a sizable amount of time that this could have happened. This is based on Herod's math. Now, then what had been spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were no more. This is a brutal genocide of youth during a 2-year span. So any child born in the land of Israel, 2 years old and older, were killed. And so it's just this brutal thing. How sick is a man named Herod who's fearful of a child? Verse 19, But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee and came and settled in a city called Nazareth. This happened so that what was spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. Now, that's the story that then leads us up to these two verses that we're going to look at today, verse 39 and 40. So, wise men are coming from the east. Herod orders a killing. They see the child. They give him the frankincense and myrrh. Jesus and his family depart for Exodus. They're down there for a season. A couple of years go by, or whenever Herod passed away, they move back. are heading to Judah, and then decide because of Herod's son reigning that they're going to go on straight on to Nazareth, which is their homeland, our home city. Now, so an angel appears and all that takes place. Now, then it says this, and when his parents had completed everything in accordance with the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own city of Nazareth. Now the child continued to grow and to become strong, increasing in wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. So this is what we're going to look at today. This is kind of that section. So when you see this, it says that there were three things that happened. He grew in stature, that is his physical body. He increased in wisdom, and the favor of God was on him. So those are the three things that are taking place that happen. The next glimpse, this is all we get of Jesus' childhood in the scriptures. That really is it. We know that, somewhere around 18 months to 2 years old, he made his way up to Nazareth. And then from 2 years old to 12 years old, this 10-year span, these are the only two verses that we have to kind of tell us what he did. And so we're just going to kind of break this down and see it. It says, so he grew, all right, to become strong. So he's learning all those things, right? He's getting calluses on his hands. He's learning to walk because those were things that you did. He went through the potty training phase or whatever they would have called that back then, right? He did that. He went through that process. Went through the process of puberty or thereabouts. By the time he's 12, he's right there in that, and so. These are all the things that he's doing. His body's going through physical changes. Now, he's aware of those changes because he created all of that, right? But he had never experienced it from the vantage point of being a human. So he's gaining wisdom in this process, and that's kind of the thing that goes on. So listen, he lived a sinless life. There was no sin in him. So there was nothing that could affect his growth in that sense. We do know that sin can have an effect on us, right? I mean, we worry, we think those things, ulcers happen. There's all sorts of things that can take place. But he did none of those things. He was a carpenter's son, so we assume he was helping fell trees and carve, or whether he was a stone carpenter. That sometimes some people have surmised that whatever it was, then he knew how to do mortar and chisel and all of those things, and so that would be a part of his growing up. He also grew up with brothers. He grew up with his brother James and Jude, or James and Jose, Jude and Simeon. James and Jude were two. You find their writings in the scriptures, but they didn't come to Christ. They didn't come to believe he was the Messiah until literally after his death. And then you have James, who pastored the first church in the New Testament in Jerusalem, and he wrote the book of James. And then you have Jude, his other brother, his third down the line, fourth child of, fourth son of Mary, Jude, who wrote the book Jude that we'll look at after we finish here. And there was Jose and Simon, and there were sisters, plural. So he had a family, right? And so he's having to learn to get along and do all of those things. He's seeing them stumble and mumble through life, and he's seeing them lie to get out of trouble or whatever that those things could have been. I mean, they were dirty, rotten, stinking little sinners like the rest of us, and so they were prone to lie to cover up things. They were prone to lust. All of the things that would have happened, he would have seen that within the household. And then it says that he grew to become strong, right? He continued to grow, so his body is now developing muscles. There's all of these things that are taking place. He's working with his father. That's happening. He's going through all of these seasonal changes and the things that happen, right? If he had joint pain from growing pains, we called them, right? All of those things. And then it says he was increasing in wisdom. And you think, wait a minute, he had the mind of Christ, right? So he literally the mind of Christ. He knew everything, right? But it was unaffected by sin, but yet he still gained wisdom from that knowledge. Does it make sense? So he had knowledge applied to living life as a mortal, right? So he lived and gained wisdom about eating and how that diet was a healthy thing. So he grew in wisdom according to his diet, so to speak. His body would get tired and it would grow weary, and so that would be new because God never grows weary. But yet in this body, so he was gaining wisdom to understand, the process of what the body does when it goes through sleep, when it's awake, when it's working, when it's resting. Right, all of those concepts is what we would call wisdom. He's taking the knowledge that he knows everything, and he's applying wisdom to it from the vantage point of being a human. He went. I'm assuming that he missed the nail a time or two, potentially not, but he went through some pain, and he felt that as a kid, the falling down, the stumbling when you're learning to walk. Unless in fact he didn't, I would assume that he did. But those would be the things that he would do, right? And so so he had the mind of God that was unaffected by sin, but yet he learned things. Now I'm sure he passed every test he had, right? He knew the history of mankind. He understood math. I mean, he listened the numbers in all of Scripture and the math that is in there and the preciseness of it. He understood those things. He understood languages, right? I mean, he knows those things. He knew literature, science, art, music, Scripture, right? All of those things. Man, if he painted something, would it have been perfect? If he sang, was it perfect pitch? These are things that we don't know, but we do know that he grew in wisdom. Wisdom simply means knowledge applied, and so since he is wisdom, right? He's the source of wisdom, but he's learning it. He's growing in wisdom, increasing in wisdom of what it's like to live encased in flesh. Make sense? That's how we would determine what happens here. Then. It says that the favor of God was on him, right? That God was blessing him into everything that he did. A couple of other passages I think that might be helpful to look at. In Hebrews 4, it tells us this. Therefore, since we have a high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but one who has been tempted in all things, just as we are, yet without sin. So if we think in terms of wisdom, right? So he was tempted. There were little girls, that he was tempted in that sense, right? Though he didn't sin. He was tempted to lie. He was tempted to be arrogant. He was tempted to be all of the sins that you and I can engage in. He had the opportunity to do those. But it says, but he did not sin in that process. So he learned obedience. This is what he's learning in that process through suffering. Now, that we find that in Hebrews chapter 5. In the days of his humanity, right? In the days that he's in his human, encased in flesh, Hebrews 5:7, it says, he offered up both prayers and pleas with loud cryings and tears to the one able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his devout behavior. So there's this, there are these cries. He understood the frailty of all of this. He understood that. Verse 8, although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered. And having been perfected, he became the source of eternal salvation for all those who obey him. Like what are they saying there? Hey, he learned obedience too. He learned that it's not easy. And he learned from a human perspective, pain hurts. Death is something to be avoided. It's what we seek to do. We seek to live. And so these are all the things that he's going through. So there was overwhelming mental and spiritual strength that he developed in that process. The 40 days in the wilderness, right? The loneliness that he would have experienced. He began to understand and identify with us in all of those things. Getting in trouble wrongly, right? I'm sure his brothers blamed him on something. Oh, I was Jesus, right? But yet he did not sin. And so these are just the surmisings that we come to here. But we see that glimpse till he was 12. That's the only snapshot that we have. And so with that, we're going to move on in our day. And Lord willing, I'll see you in the morning, and we'll look at a unique situation that happened when he was 12. And so we'll see that tomorrow, Lord willing. Have a great day. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.